"She's stealing building material," she yelled, phone in hand, pointing at me like I was some kind of criminal. I froze mid-lift, half a bag of cement on my shoulder, the other hand gripping the truck tailgate. The air smelled like pine and dust, and my son's old toolbox sat open on the ground. "Ma'am, this is my property," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. She stepped closer, wearing that shiny HOA badge she'd probably printed herself. "Not anymore," she snapped. "You can't build anything here without our approval." I almost laughed. "Your approval? This land doesn't even fall under your HOA." But she was already talking to the 911 operator, saying something about a suspicious man with stolen goods. My pulse started to pound. I knew what this was, the third time she'd tried to run someone off this side of the lake. A few neighbors peeked out from their porches. Some pretended not to see. Karen paced like she owned the ground beneath her, shouting directions to imaginary officers. I didn't move. I'd learned long ago that silence makes people nervous. The sirens echoed through the trees. My heart sank, but I kept stacking the supplies. She smirked. "You're going to regret this," she said. I gave her a small smile back. "Maybe," I replied. "But you might regret it first." The police truck pulled in, lights flashing against the water. Karen waved them down, pointing straight at me. "That's him! Arrest him before he runs!" she screamed. The officer looked from her to me, his brow furrowing. "Sir," he asked, "you have proof this is your property?" Karen folded her arms, confident she'd already won. But I reached into the cab, pulled out a worn-out leather folder, and handed it over. The cop flipped through the papers slowly, then glanced at me again. His face changed. "Wait," he said, looking closer at my name on the deed. "Are you Sergeant Cole Reynolds?" Karen's smile dropped. I didn't answer. I just nodded once. The officer's tone shifted immediately. "Ma'am, I think you should step back," he said firmly. Karen blinked, confused. "Why? He's trespassing." The officer exhaled. "No, ma'am. He owns this land, and maybe you shouldn't have called 911 for something you don't understand." Karen's face went pale. She turned toward me, lips trembling but still full of fake authority. "This isn't over," she muttered. I looked her dead in the eye. "You're right," I said quietly. "It's just getting started." The cops drove off after warning her about false reports, but Karen didn't move. She stood there at the edge of my driveway, her arms crossed, eyes squinting like she was memorizing every inch of my property. I kept unloading supplies, wood planks, steel rods, a generator, pretending not to notice her phone camera aimed at me. "You think you can intimidate me because you used to wear a uniform?" she said loudly. "This neighborhood follows my rules." I chuckled under my breath. "Funny," I said without looking at her. "I don't remember voting for you." That hit her. She stomped closer, her perfume cutting through the smell of oil and sawdust. "You can't build a cabin without HOA authorization," she hissed. "And this lake belongs to the community." I finally turned to her, my hands covered in dirt. "This lake was private land before your HOA even existed. I bought it 20 years ago, while you were probably handing out parking tickets to teenagers." Her face twitched. "You think a piece of paper means anything? I can make one phone call and have your permit revoked." I took a slow breath. "Do what you need to do, Karen." My tone must have unsettled her because she paused. That's when I saw her glance toward the woods. A tall man in a security jacket stood half hidden among the trees. He had a radio clipped to his chest, eyes on me. I didn't like that. "Who's that?" I asked, nodding toward him. She smirked. "Community enforcement," she said almost proudly. "We handle our own problems here." The man started walking closer, one hand near his belt. Something about his uniform felt off. No badge, no patch, no ID. My gut tightened. "Karen," I said quietly, "if that man steps onto my land, it's trespassing." She smiled coldly. "Only if you can prove it before he removes you." That's when the so-called officer spoke up. "Sir, you're going to have to come with us." I froze, my eyes narrowing on the radio in his hand. It wasn't a police model. It was a cheap walkie-talkie. Fake cops. Again. Karen's grin widened. "You see Sergeant Reynolds?" she whispered. "You're not the only one who knows people." I dropped the hammer I was holding, the sound echoing across the quiet lake. "Good," I said slowly, stepping toward her. "Then you know what happens when people lie to the wrong man." The fake officer stepped closer, his boots crunching over gravel. He tried to sound official, but his voice shook just enough for me to notice. "Step back from the supplies, sir. We've had reports of theft." Karen folded her arms and smirked like she'd already won. "You should have listened to me earlier, Sergeant," she said. "Would have saved yourself a whole lot of trouble." I didn't move. I kept my eyes on the man pretending to be law enforcement. "Where's your badge number?" I asked calmly. He froze for a second, then muttered something about temporary detail. That's when I took a slow step toward my truck, pretending to grab another tool. My phone, already recording from the dashboard, was catching every word. Karen didn't notice. She was too busy rehearsing her victory. "He's been working without permits," she said loudly, addressing the fake cop. "And threatening me. I want him off this property right now." "Threatening you?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "That's new." The man glanced between us, uncertain. "Let's not make this hard," he said. "We can settle this at the station." "There is no station," I replied. "You're not real law enforcement." Karen laughed, but it was shaky now. "Oh, please. He's with the county. County officers don't wear tactical boots with Walmart logos," I interrupted. The man's face went pale. He looked down, realizing I'd caught him. That's when a real siren echoed from down the road, sharper, faster, official. Karen spun around, confused. The fake officer bolted toward the trees, disappearing into the woods like a guilty ghost. The sheriff's truck screeched to a stop beside my cabin. The same officer from earlier stepped out, looking at Karen like he'd just stepped into déjà vu. "Ma'am, we got a report of an impersonator near this address," he said. Karen tried to play it off. "Oh, that was just a misunderstanding," she said quickly, tucking her phone away. "He was helping me." The sheriff crossed his arms. "Helping you impersonate a deputy?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. I stayed quiet, just watching. The sheriff turned to me. "You okay, Sergeant?" "Fine," I said. "But I'd like to press charges." "This is the second time she's done this," Karen finally snapped. "You can't do this to me." "I run this community," she shouted, pointing wildly. The sheriff sighed. "No, ma'am. You don't run anything here except your mouth." He looked back at his deputy. "Get her statement. We'll handle the rest." As they pulled her aside, Karen glared at me with pure venom. "You'll regret this," she whispered as the deputy led her toward the cruiser. I gave her one last look. "You already said that," I replied quietly. "Maybe it's time to start regretting it yourself." Karen sat in the back of the sheriff's cruiser, still mouthing off through the half-open window. "You people don't understand who you're dealing with," she barked, voice echoing through the trees. The sheriff ignored her and walked back toward me, rubbing his forehead. "She's been calling in complaints all month," he said. "Half of them fake. We've warned her, but this one—" He looked toward the woods where the fake officer had vanished. "That's a new level," I nodded slowly. "She's not working alone," I said. "Someone's feeding her information. She knew exactly when I was bringing my supplies." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "You got cameras around here?" "Everywhere," I said. "Night vision, motion triggered." "She just didn't know they record sound too." He raised a brow. "You got her on tape?" I smiled faintly. "Her and her officer clear as daylight." Karen overheard that from the cruiser. She slammed her hands on the glass. "That's illegal. You can't record me without permission." The sheriff glanced at her, unimpressed. "You were standing on his land, ma'am." "That's permission enough." She froze, realizing the hole she'd just dug herself into. I turned back toward my cabin, but something in my gut told me this wasn't over. People like her don't quit when they lose. They double down. That night, I set up extra motion lights and checked my camera feed before locking up. The reflection of the moon shimmered across the lake, peaceful for once. My dog Scout paced near the door, uneasy. Around midnight, a sound, metal scraping, broke the stillness. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped onto the porch. The generator cover was open. My toolbox was gone. I followed the tracks down the slope, the beam of my light bouncing off the wet ground until it landed on a familiar figure near the dock. Karen. She was dragging my generator toward her car, her hair wild, her face twisted with fury. "You don't deserve this place," she hissed when she saw me. I couldn't help but laugh softly. "You called the cops for me moving supplies. And now you're stealing mine?" She swung the flashlight at me, her voice shaking. "This lake belongs to us. You can't just take it." "Karen," I said slowly, stepping closer. "You're trespassing again." She froze, realizing something behind me. 2 red lights flickering through the trees. The sheriff's truck. Karen's face drained of color as his voice boomed. "Step away from the equipment, ma'am." Her lips trembled. "This isn't what it looks like. It looks like theft," the sheriff said, stepping out. "And this time there's no misunderstanding." Karen glanced at me, her eyes full of panic. "You set me up," I shook my head. "No, Karen," I said quietly. "You set yourself up." Karen's voice cracked as the sheriff read her rights. "You can't arrest me. My husband's a lawyer," she shouted, trying to twist free. The deputy cuffed her anyway, calm and practiced. The only sounds were the crickets and the soft hum of the lake. The sheriff turned to me. "We'll take her in, but something tells me she's not the only one stirring this up." He was right. The next morning, when I drove into town for lumber, I noticed a notice of violation posted on my truck windshield. HOA letterhead. Big red stamp, illegal construction, cease and desist. Karen was locked up, but someone else was still pulling strings. I walked into the hardware store feeling every eye on me. The clerk leaned in and whispered, "Heard the HOA's after you. They're saying you built without a permit." I smiled. They can say whatever they want. When I got home, I found two men in suits waiting at the edge of my driveway. One of them held a clipboard. The other had sunglasses too dark for the cloudy weather. "Mr. Reynolds?" the first one said. "We're here on behalf of the Lakeshore Homeowners Association." "Funny," I said, stepping out of the truck. "I thought your president was in jail." The man smiled politely. "Temporary leadership shift," he said. "We've decided to reevaluate land boundaries. There seems to be confusion about where your property ends." "Confusion?" I asked, folding my arms. "You people printed fake maps last year." "Just paperwork, sir," the second man said smoothly. "Nothing personal." That phrase, "nothing personal," made my blood boil. I took a step closer. "You're trying to steal this land. My family built this cabin with our hands. My father fished this lake before your HOA even existed." The man with the clipboard cleared his throat. "We'll be conducting a formal review next week. If you can't provide verified documentation by then, the board reserves the right to..." "To what?" I cut him off. "Evict me from land I own?" They didn't answer, just exchanged a look, turned and walked toward their car. Scout barked after them as they drove away, gravel spitting under their tires. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with the familiar feeling of being pushed too far. I walked back to my cabin, opened the drawer under the radio, and pulled out a metal lockbox. Inside were the original land deeds, stamped, notarized, and signed by the county years ago. But right beneath them was something else. A flash drive. A quiet smile crept across my face. That drive held more than just proof of ownership. It had every recorded call, every camera clip, every fake notice they'd ever placed, and one recording I'd never shown anyone. Karen wasn't acting alone. Her lawyer husband, he was the HOA chair. I sat at the old wooden desk staring at that flash drive. The room was quiet except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. Scout lay near my boots, ears twitching at every distant sound. I plugged the drive into my laptop, the screen flickering to life with a folder labeled Lake Files. I'd kept these recordings hidden for years, back when the HOA first tried to pressure my father into selling the land. He never gave in, neither would I. I clicked the first file. Karen's voice crackled through the speakers. "We can claim it under environmental restriction. Say his land runoff affects the lake." Another voice followed, deeper, colder, male. "Make sure it looks legal. I'll handle the county office." Her husband. I leaned back, jaw tight. This wasn't just Karen being power drunk. This was a setup, planned, rehearsed, and signed off by the man who ran the whole HOA. The next morning, I called the sheriff. "I've got something you'll want to hear," I said. He stopped by within the hour, still in uniform, coffee in hand. When I played the recording, he sat forward in his chair. "That's Gregory Holt," he muttered. "He's been the HOA chair for years. His name's on half the zoning approvals in this county." I nodded. "And probably half the bribes." He looked at me, eyes serious now. "You know what happens when we expose someone like him, right?" "He's connected," I smiled. "So am I." The sheriff didn't ask, but I could tell he was curious. He didn't know about my time in the investigations unit, or the friends I still had in state offices. I wasn't just some ex-sergeant with land. I knew exactly how to take down a corrupt network. That night I started sending files. Every clip, every audio, every fake notice, straight to a contact at the state attorney's office. I didn't expect a reply so soon, but an hour later a message pinged back. Received. This is enough to open an inquiry. For the first time in weeks, I slept without keeping the light on, but the calm didn't last. The next day, I returned from town to find tire marks cutting deep into the mud near the dock. My storage shed's door hung open. Inside, everything was gone. Tools, equipment, even the generator that Karen had tried to steal before. On the wall, taped to a wooden beam, was a fresh HOA notice written in thick red marker. Final warning: vacate the premises before it gets worse. No signature. No logo. Just a fingerprint smeared beside the words. It wasn't Karen's, it was bigger, rougher, and somehow, I knew exactly whose it was. Gregory Holt had just made his move. By dawn, I was sitting on the porch with a cup of black coffee, watching the mist crawl over the lake. Scout kept pacing near the steps, uneasy again. The silence didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt like the air was holding its breath. I knew what was coming. When men like Gregory Holt get cornered, they don't run. They strike first. Around 9, I heard tires on gravel. A black SUV rolled up to the edge of my property and stopped. 2 men stepped out, suits again, but not the kind that belong in a courtroom. One wore gloves, the other carried a metal clipboard that looked a lot like a prop. Holt got out last, calm as if he owned the world. "Morning, Sergeant Reynolds," he said smoothly, buttoning his jacket. "We need to talk." I didn't answer. Just leaned on the railing, letting the coffee steam between us. He glanced around the cabin. "You've made quite a mess. Karen's facing felony charges, and it's not going to look good when the rest of the board finds out what you've been doing here." "What I've been doing?" I asked. He smiled thinly. "Unapproved construction, illegal use of restricted shoreline, and trespassing on community land. That's 3 violations, grounds for seizure." I let out a small laugh. "You practice that line?" His eyes hardened. "You think you can fight me with your little recordings? You don't know how things work around here." That's when I saw movement near the tree line. A county truck marked not fake. Then another. Then a third. They rolled up slowly, parking just behind his SUV. Out stepped 2 deputies and the sheriff himself. Holt's voice faltered. "What's this?" The sheriff didn't even look at me. He spoke straight to Holt. "Mr. Holt, you're under investigation by the state attorney's office for fraud, extortion, and conspiracy to falsify property records." The color drained from Holt's face. "This is outrageous." "You can't." "I can," the sheriff interrupted. "And I will. We have your calls, your fake notices, and your bank transfers, all sent by Sergeant Reynolds here." Holt turned toward me, rage replacing his fake calm. "You think this is justice? You'll regret crossing me." I took a slow sip of coffee. "Funny," I said softly. "That's exactly what your wife said." The deputies moved in, cuffing him as his men stood frozen. Holt tried one last threat, yelling about lawyers, influence, and connections, but the sound of those handcuffs clicking shut cut him off mid-sentence. Karen had called fake cops. Holt had built a fake system, but neither of them realized I was recording from the first day she yelled across that driveway. As the sheriff led Holt to the cruiser, I finally felt the air loosen around me. The grip of their corruption was breaking, but in the back of my mind I knew there was still one thing left unresolved. One thing the sheriff hadn't seen, because one of the recordings had another voice on it. Someone higher than Holt. Someone in the county office who had approved every illegal HOA expansion for years. And that voice had said one chilling sentence: "Make sure Reynolds doesn't rebuild that cabin." That night the lake was quieter than it had ever been. The flashing lights were gone, the SUV was towed, and for the first time in months I could hear the frogs again. Scout lay by the fireplace, finally sleeping easy, but I couldn't. The words from that last recording kept replaying in my head. "Make sure Reynolds doesn't rebuild that cabin." Whoever said it wasn't just another HOA thug. That was someone in power, someone with reach. The next morning I drove down to the county office, the flash drive in my pocket like a loaded weapon. People stared as I walked through the doors, half curious, half nervous. I went straight to the zoning department and handed the drive to the clerk. "I need this sent to the state attorney. It concerns Gregory Holt and a county official." The clerk hesitated. "Sir, is this about the HOA case?" "Not just that," I said. "It's about who's been protecting them." Within hours, the state investigators were on site. By noon, 3 offices were sealed off, and by evening, local news vans were parked outside the courthouse. Turns out the corruption ran deeper than anyone guessed. Fake land surveys, forged boundary maps, even payoff lists hidden in HOA ledgers. And at the center of it all was a county supervisor who'd been approving every one of Holt's adjustments. When the story broke, neighbors started showing up at my cabin, people I hadn't spoken to in years. One man, older with grease-stained hands, said quietly, "I lost my doc because of them. You did what we couldn't. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't after fame. I just wanted my home back." A week later, the sheriff came by with a small envelope. "Official county certification," he said, handing it to me. "Your property's secure. They can't touch it again." Inside was a single document, confirmed ownership of Lake Parcel 14 Cole Reynolds, signed and sealed by the state. Karen and Holt were both facing trial. The HOA board had been dissolved, and that mysterious county official? He was under federal investigation. I walked down to the dock at sunset, the same dock Karen had tried to steal from me, and let the wind carry off everything I'd been holding in. Scout sat beside me, watching the light fade across the water. "I didn't fight for this country," I said quietly, "to be told I can't live on my own land." The lake shimmered, calm again, like it had been waiting for peace too. I poured the last of my coffee into the water and smiled. "Guess we're finally home, buddy," Scout barked once, like he agreed. And for the first time in a long time, the world felt right again. Viral line. She called the cops to take my land, but in the end, it was her own lies that got her arrested on it.